out some Know Your Rights cards, so please pick one up before you leave. They're very good to have with you at all times, or at least know the information on them. Our next speaker is going to be Carolyn Phillips. She's a local attorney. She's going to be talking about the legal rights of the homeless and what they should do if arrested under the no camping ordinance. And then part 2 of that is giving us some instructions for those who intend to stay the night and risk arrest. Carolyn?
Hi, it's good to be with everybody. It's nice to see so many people out in solidarity in this issue. To me, the ordinance on its face is so overbroad, and I want to echo what Aubrey said. It gives the police so much discretion to decide what to do. Under the ordinance, it becomes a misdemeanor for someone to be camping on public or private land. It is the subjective decision of the officer when he comes upon someone who he believes is camping to make the determination that that person is in violation of the ordinance. Once the officer does that, the ordinance allows for that officer to also exercise his discretion to decide whether or not the individual who may be arrested should be given an opportunity to access services, housing, mental health services, social services, rehab services. That point is left to the officer, but I think there is one thing that we should all remember. If an officer approaches you, you're camping, you are located somewhere, where that officer comes up and says, you're in violation of this ordinance, it's my intention to arrest you. At that point, if you are willing, what I suggest is that you demand housing. I'm here, I need housing. Find me housing. Yeah! And I do that because I think the experience has been, the majority experience has been that there is no housing. If there were housing, there wouldn't be people living on the streets. But I would suggest this, demand and insist. If they arrest you, or they intend to arrest you, you say, no, I want services, I want housing. What's supposed to happen at that point is anyone's guess. We don't know yet. From the ordinance, it's not very clear. It's not clear if the officer has any obligation at that point to follow up with your request. There's nothing in the ordinance that requires that officer to do anything, frankly, but make a subjective decision at that point whether or not you should be arrested. If you are arrested, there are other things you need to know. One is, you have the right to remain silent. You have an obligation to provide your identification, to tell them who you are. They will take you, they'll book you. We don't know, again, how this is going to play out, whether or not they book you. They keep you there as a misdemeanor, or they're going to release you. But the point is this, if they decide to release you and it's a citation, what's happened between the point of your arrest and being delivered to the police station is where are your belongings? Those belongings have now been confiscated by the officers. The ordinance indicates that before you can get your belongings back, you actually have to pay for the actual costs to the city for taking and storing your belongings. Yeah. So what we have is sort of a circular ordinance. One, everything is left to the discretion of the police officer, but two, if you're arrested and you're released, where are you going to go? If they haven't offered you housing, or they haven't given you an option to be somewhere else other than camping, it seems to me that we have the cycle starting all over again. It's very important for you, if you can, to remember the name of the person who or the badge number of the individual who arrests you, to ask for services, to see if there's anyone you know, I don't know, to take your things so that they're not actually taken and stored away somewhere. You know, if you're arrested, if they don't offer you services, and you're released, they will cite you. You'll have a date to come back and make an appearance. You should be appointed counsel. You will ask for an attorney. That's number one, and it's very critical. While we're left with, I think, a completely bogus ordinance that places many people in jeopardy, and it's a jeopardy of criminal prosecution. It's shameful, it's inexcusable. I know that the ACLU is looking at this issue in terms of constitutionality. I suggest, if you can, to pick up one of their little pamphlets, but I also have their phone number. My suggestion is, if you can, to call the ACLU if you're arrested, if you're harassed by the police, and just tell them what happened, what was your experience. That number is 415-621-2493. It's on the cards, and it may be on some other information that we have here. So that's, you know, in some ways I feel a bit at a loss, because the ordinance at this point, as far as I know, unless someone has any other information about it, I don't know of anybody that's actually been arrested yet. So I don't know how this is all going to play out. But, yeah. Oh, yes, thank you, Bob. Bob Navarro. Body cameras. The police officers are supposed to have body cameras. I know you can ask if they have body cameras, ask them to turn them on. But we also know that it's almost impossible to actually have access to that information, but I still suggest doing it. Who knows, there might be at some point we may actually be able to have a chance to review that information. So that's kind of it's a vague ordinance, and that's my advice to you at this point. I mean, we certainly, attorneys I know, want to keep track of what's going on. I don't know about legal services, if they're going to also be keeping track of this. But the main thing is demand housing. Always demand housing. We're going to have to just play it as it is and see what happens. In terms of tonight, this is an act of civil disobedience, as we've already heard. We have a right to be here if, in fact, sometime during this evening, the police come and they demand that you disperse. You, at that point, have a decision to make. You can disperse and avoid arrest, or you can decide to be arrested. If you decide to be arrested, understand, I know with Occupy Fresno, even though the jail is right here, a couple blocks away, they actually brought paddy wagons, put everyone in a paddy wagon and drove them all the way over to be booked. But that's what will happen, you'll be booked. If you have medications or anything that's of value that you want someone who is not being arrested to have, then make sure that they have possession of those things. It's important for you to comply. If you decided you're going to be arrested, you need to comply with the instructions of the officer. Don't resist arrest, because then you're looking at a much harder, well, they can charge you with resisting arrest, and you don't really need that. I think ultimately what will happen if you decide not to disperse is that they will cite you and release you eventually, but it can take hours and hours and hours. So just be aware, if the police do show up, if they say you must disperse, because there is no permit for this event, so it's up to you, but you need to know what you're getting into. You will be booked, and the whole process is going to be very long. So if you have medications that you need to take, and you can take them and then be arrested, do that. But they mean business, and you need to cooperate. And that's kind of the bottom line.
Okay. Thank you. And there's some flyers that we've produced that tell you about this. So take one of the flyers. If you're planning on staying the night, you may risk arrest. I don't know at this point. They've been very vague about what they're going to do. I've heard that they don't want to arrest us, and I've heard that they might. So you need to understand that. Take a flyer if you're planning on spending the night with us. I will be here all night, unless they drag me away. But I think there's some strength in numbers. So the more people we can have here tonight, spending the night, the more safe we will be. So if you're able to stay with us, please do, because that will help provide us some security. Another thought about this is that this is kind of different than what's happening with most homeless people, because they're scattered throughout the city and they're going to be picked off one at a time. We're here in solidarity with the homeless, and we'll be in solidarity with ourselves too. We'll be looking out for each other tonight. So please stay if you can.